Hi, I'm Keith. I am trained as a linguistic anthropologist, which basically means that I study language and culture. And for most of my career, I've studied the language and culture of people who design things. First, it was architects in Los Angeles, then furniture designers in Sweden, and most recently, type designers in San Francisco and New York City. And while I was doing field work with type designers in 2019, somebody asked me if I'd ever heard of Unicode. And like most people to whom I've now posed the same question, I responded with something like, yeah, maybe something like that. Um, that moment of vague recognition eventually led me to expand the scope of my research beyond how letters and writings are designed to include underlying technologies like Unicode that allow digital writing to work. But since I'm an anthropologist, my attention naturally drifted toward the people and the practices that help maintain those technologies. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Most of you probably know at least a little bit about Unicode. And yesterday we heard an amazing talk from Anusha Hussain that covered a lot of important details. But here's how I tend to think about it. At its core, Unicode is a complex socio-technical entity. And when I say that, I'm not just talking in abstractions. Unicode exists as multiple things that are both social and technical at once. First and foremost, Unicode is a technical standard for encoding text on digital devices. And the standard takes different forms. There's computer readable form of actual code, including thousands of numbers called code points that are embedded within software to process digital text. The point, code point 0041, for example, is assigned to uppercase A, but lowercase a is assigned to a different code point 0061. This one, H with a little hat on top, is 0125, and pi is 03C0, and so on. Now, alongside the standard's computer readable code, there is the human readable form of the standard's documentation, a collection of graphic and textual resources that make the technical information relatively easy to understand. Every writing system encoded in Unicode has its own chart that shows what characters look like, their code points, and their official names. For example, 03C0 is Greek small letter pi, and 0125 is Latin small letter h with circumflex. The U plus part that you will see sometimes at the start of a code point indicates a couple of things. One, that the number is specifically a Unicode code point, and second, that it's in hexadecimal form, which is to say base 16, not binary or decimal. There are also supplementary resources that aid in implementing the standard, which describe things like how words are formed, how lines break with each script, how dates and times should be displayed, and whether a script reads left to right or right to left. So in other words, the standard encompasses not only code and information about the code, but also details about many other properties that make digital writing work. But Unicode isn't just a technical standard in code and text. It's also irreducibly its people. Management scholars Joanne Yates and Craig Murphy would describe Unicode's people its standards bearers, that is, the ones who built and manage it. From its earliest days in the 1980s, the Unicode standard was conceived as a single repository for storing digital versions of human scripts. Its founders believed that technology shouldn't prevent people from using their own languages on digital platforms, so the standard should be maximally accommodating. They designed it to expand over time by adding new writing systems or by adding new characters to systems that are already encoded. But importantly, that expansion, which is processed through formal proposal submissions now, isn't open or random. It requires careful and professional oversight. The body that handles the oversight is the Unicode Consortium. At first glance, the consortium seems dominated by Silicon Valley heavy hitters, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and perhaps by implication, their corporate prerogatives. Yet while these companies as institutions do play an important role in sustaining the consortium, It's the work of their representatives and other individual members, diligent technicians and earnest believers in Unicode's mission, that matters most to the actual practice of managing the standard. The group most responsible for the standard itself is the Unicode Technical Committee, or UTC, which is made up of volunteer representatives from both consortium members and elsewhere. Within the UTC are several working groups focused on different aspects of the standard. There's one for CJK characters, one for emoji, and then there's the script encoding working group. When a proposal to add a character, when a proposal to add a character or script to the standard is submitted to Unicode, anything that isn't CJK or emoji, it's reviewed by this small team. The UTC makes all final decisions, but the script encoding working group is where proposals receive the most detailed evaluation. In 2019, I was invited to observe a number of Unicode meetings. I spent several months doing so, talking to Unicode members about their work. Soon enough, I started to see a paradox that sits at the core of Unicode's entire endeavor. The people of Unicode overwhelmingly view themselves as technically minded and their work as technical work. Most have training or a lifetime of experience in computer programming and engineering. And they tend to see their role as administrators of a technical thing. They attend to code and they attend to the documentation of code to ensure that its implementation runs smoothly. What Unicode members do not see themselves doing, and what they very much prefer to avoid, is attending to a world of human affairs. And yet, writing systems are undeniably and always inherently human things. They're things that people use in their everyday lives, things that people love or hate, things that link directly to ethnic or religious identities, things that people have fought wars over, things that have been intentionally erased by oppressive forces and intentionally revived by communities that struggle to fight back. That's where the paradox starts. To avoid the human side of scripts is in some respects to avoid the most significant aspects of writing's reality. When discussing these issues, the typical, if not official, stance is for Unicode members to explicitly reject a stake in what they often gloss as politics. Politics here can mean different things. Sometimes it's relatively small-scale stuff, like when community members can't agree on the shape of a letter, or where in the inventory it should be sorted. As one Unicode member described it to me, Unicode tries not to get into political issues. They want the community to say, okay, this is our orthography. Orthography is a hard word for me to say in my accent. Orthography. This is how we want our letters to look. We want them to get all that thoroughly settled before they come to us. But politics can also manifest at larger scales and in more fraught contexts. Maybe a proposed writing system is used by a minoritized population and its encoding faces opposition from an oppressive government. Or maybe two rival communities that use the same script disagree on exactly how it should be encoded. To demonstrate the underlying politics problem in a more obvious way, Unicode members would routinely cite flag emojis. Who gets to have their own flag emoji? A nation like China, surely. But what about Tibet? What about subnational regions like states? What about contested regions like Kashmir? And then there are identity groups. There's a pride flag emoji and a trans flag emoji. But should any group that has a flag have it encoded in Unicode? These are the kinds of political questions that Unicode does not want to be in the business of answering. So much so that in 2022, the UTC stopped encoding flag emojis altogether. But when it comes to characters and scripts, the politics problem persists. The Unicode members I talked to worried that as engineers, they're not equipped to evaluate political claims related to scripts and characters, especially ones involving controversy or discord. They're experts in code, not sociology, and they prefer to keep it that way. They also worry about slippery slopes. To let one group's politics have too much sway on the shape of the standard is to open a Pandora's box. So, While what counts as politics can vary from case to case and maybe even from person to person, the general sentiment expressed in its disavowal is clear. The Unicode standard is a technical entity designed for computers. Human issues are not our purview. They belong to another domain. Now, here is the paradox restated outright. Unicode does not want to deal with human affairs. Unicode deals with scripts. Yet scripts are always inescapably human in one way or another. So how is this paradox resolved? Because members are comfortable understanding and working with technical data, they just need to render the messy human aspects of writing in a neat and technical way. And I think the main mechanism that's emerged for doing this work is the literal form used for the encoding proposal itself. It's tempting to, I love to have my talk laughed at in real time. It's a great form. It's tempting to see forms and files and documents like this, in Unicode proposals like this, as boring instruments of bureaucratic efficiency. And that is what they are. They're basically the fuel that keeps the bureaucracy up and running. But as anthropologist Matthew Hall has pointed out, files and documents accomplish their bureaucracy-sustaining work, not just by containing information that matters to the bureaucracy, but also because of how they present and order that information. In their often banal designs, files and documents shape how bureaucrats interpret both the information the files hold and the systems through which the information circulates. As Hall has argued, these graphic artifacts, as he calls them, they communicate, but they're also critical tools that mediate how a bureaucracy understands itself and its work. So here's what I think is going on with Unicode. Proposals, because of how they're designed and what they ask for, act as what Michel Foucault would call a grid of intelligibility. That they can transform messy, dispersed, and quasi-reliable social information into neat, orderly, and reputable human data that technicians are more comfortable evaluating. The basic proposal form looks like any other form you can imagine. At the top, there's an administrative information box, but the two main sections of the document are labeled technical general and technical justification. And here's where the transformation begins. Everything the proposal requests is officially rendered technical. It's formatted as a series of roughly equivalent rectangles that flatten the three-dimensional world into two dimensions, though note that almost everything in the proposal requires more space than these rectangles can provide. Those rectangles are ordered alongside a list of questions. Most of the questions are relevant to the mechanics of the existing Unicode standard. In what block of code should the character or script be placed? What should it be named? According to what encoding model should it be operationalized? But mixed in among these technical questions are other less technical questions that mostly concern the social world in which the character or script subsists. Who is the community of users? What contexts is it used in? Are there experts who've been consulted? Who can make a font if this gets encoded? Of course, on the surface, these questions seem simple enough. Again, roughly equivalent to their technical counterparts. But achieving that rough equivalence between phenomena that are not at all equivalent is precisely the point. The non-technical questions compel proposal authors to give a specific shape to writing's real-world unshapeliness, one that conforms to what Unicode can treat as data. This generates human data, which is not a term that Unicode uses. I'm calling it this. Anything that grounds a character or script in a social world, but does so in a way that indicates that the character or script will be used by real people. Human data can take a few different forms. The minimum form is usually just a short narrative that explains why some community of users needs the character or script to be encoded. It can be a testimonial from an expert that attests to the social historical significance of the character or script. But the most powerful data tends to take the form of images. The proposal for the Kirit Rai, for example, the writing system of Bantua spoken in parts of Nepal and India, contained pages and pages of images. Some were snapshots of handwritten characters on paper. Some were extracted from older scholarly books that described the Kirit Rai alphabet. Some were scans of student workbooks and other learning resources. One was of a wooden sculpture with the script inscribed on its surface, and then that circulated on Facebook. Each image alone serves as a piece of human data, a snapshot of one instance of the Kirit Rai script in use. Taken together, though, the whole collection provides a richly textured outline of a dynamic human world that is, crucially, systematically organized in a way that's ready to receive a digital version of the Kirit Rai script. The need for the script is not random, it's not niche or haphazard from this point of view. It's orderly, it's clear-cut, it's sensible. The Kirit Rai proposal was successful. It was encoded for the 16.0 release of the standard in 2024. But not all successful proposals use this more is better approach. During one of the script encoding working group meetings that I attended in 2019, a proposal concerning Punjabi came up for review. Punjabi is spoken by over 110 million people in Pakistan and India, but it's written in two different scripts. In Pakistan, it's in the Shamukhi script, alphabet derived from Arabic, and in India, it's the Gurmukhi alphabet, one of dozens of scripts derived from the ancient Brahmi script. As the proposal authors explained, the Gurmukhi alphabet contains a letter that accounts for a particular sound in Punjabi, a retroflex lateral approximant, that sh, that the Shamukhi alphabet lacks, or lacked. Their proposal was simply to add a character to the Arabic block of Unicode for use in Punjabi text. The proposal contained a suggested possible code point and offered the name Arabic letter lam with small Arabic letter ta above. The authors also explained that in Pakistan, the prevalence of Urdu and English has stymied the standardization of the Shamukhi alphabet, which partly explains why the letter wasn't previously encoded. The proposal included letters of support written by both government officials and scholars, and reference to a children's book published in 2017, in which the author stated that, quote, "We had to work around many issues to include all sounds of the Punjabi language using the Shamukhi alphabet because the character wasn't encoded." But the proposal contained only a few images of the letter in context, in contrast with the Kirit Rai proposal. And they were all drawn from a single 18th century manuscript. It wasn't the veritable photo album of examples included in the Kirit Rai proposal, but it did demonstrate the letter's earlier inclusion in the alphabet before it presumably fell out of use. As the group discussed the proposal, one member suggested that a few more real-world examples of the character might make the case for encoding this character stronger, but acknowledged that examples do seem to be hard to find. Another described it as a, quote, half historical, half aspirational character, because while there's evidence that it was used in the past, there's clearly people now who want to put it back to work. The group could find no problems with the proposal. The human data, even though it was relatively scant, was still convincing. In part, I think, because the case's narrative structure resonated with the group's technicians. The problem was neatly ordered. The group could see the missing letter did once exist, and that there is a contemporary expression of a need for it today. They could also see that the corresponding Gurmukhi script does have a letter that represents that sound. All of this together created a compelling image of a system in need of a correction, a hole that needed filling, a wobbly armature that needed rebalancing. The group recommended that UTC approve Arabic letter lam with small Arabic letter ta above in the Arabic extended A block for inclusion in the next update to Unicode, and it appeared there in 2020 as U plus 08C7. So to conclude, I started with the observation that Unicode faces a fundamental paradox. The primary thing that the organization deals with is inherently the kind of thing that its members try strenuously to avoid. My argument has been that this paradox is solved within the narrow parameters of the Unicode proposal process. particularly in its documentation, by compelling social information to conform to, literally to come into shape with, the kinds of technical data that the UTC is more comfortable managing. Once it's reformatted as neat and orderly human data, the politics that Unicode members normally turn away from is rendered useful because now it can be understood and operationalized as part of a wider technical system. Once human data has made its way into the system, it becomes incredibly important to how a proposal is evaluated and how the standard is given new and expanded form. Thank you.
Do you have any questions, please? I've got one. We've seen a lot of discussions about attitudes to encoding scripts that reveal quite a lot about the assumptions of the people designing, implementing stuff, and so on. And often a lot of the discussion focuses on the squiggly bits that make up the script, and not so much on the other stuff, on punctuation, on alphabetic characters, all the other, the wider textual apparatus for communication. And there we see a very strong assumption that a period is a period is a period. I don't care if your script practice uses punctuation differently, both in its arrangement in relation to the letter forms or characters, or in the meaning that it may have. In your insight into these meetings, did you track, since it was over a period of time, did you track any gradual change in attitude, in the recognition of a script in its use by its users is not just the bit in the Unicode block that says is your script, but might be things that have been encoded as part of something else that in practice you are also using every day? And I'm not even going into the chapter of what do applications think is your script depending on blocks.
I mean, so the short answer is yes, but the longer answer is I'm not like, I can't say it with a lot of oomph, that yes with a lot of oomph, partly because I didn't sleep last night, but also because my, I spent sort of several months and then essentially a year talking to people over the course of that year. That wasn't a long enough time for me to see change, right? But since it was in 2019, I have been talking to people over that time, and I think things have changed. Now, could I say anything super significant, like that it's changed definitively? No, I would be uncomfortable doing that. But I am sensing that, and I think this is true, and I think that Anusha's talk yesterday kind of was pointing to this as well, is that there is when it comes to Unicode and the people of Unicode, there is a rigidity that is sort of built into the system, but like all rigid structures, they start to fail, right? Or we don't need to think about it as fail, but they start to kind of give way. And I think that depends on why that gives way, has to do with a bunch of different kinds of factors, including new technological developments. The more that people find out about Unicode, the more people kind of have something to say. And the membership of who's attending meetings changes, and they have different perspectives, etc. So while there is a tremendous participation by, I'll call the old guard in Unicode, that sort of, including its founders, that sticks to a particular kind of view of what the standard is, I do think, at least at the margins, things are shifting. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is not my place to judge.
Let me come close, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was fascinating, and I just want to add a kind of maybe it's a comment rather than a question. David Machin wrote a paper some probably 20 years ago or more in visual communication about Getty images, the stock images, which he started by saying, well, Getty believed that their images are apolitical because they always have sort of quite attractive but not iconic kind of models, and they are all color coordinated, neutral backgrounds, so that they are not symbolic of any particular place. Which I think he very nicely demonstrates that it is highly political a tool of creating a vision of sort of capitalist vision of the world, or spectacularization of sort of in the sense of debauch of our world. And he said it's precisely political the way the world is depicted. So I thought it's a nice parallel to your kind of starting point and the paradox that you're dealing with here.
Thank you. I actually think stock images are something that I try to push my graduate students to do research on stock images because they're like really fascinating forms. So thank you for that citation. Yeah, I mean, I think on one level, like all institutions, bureaucracies need processes to rationalize and objectify knowledge, right? That's part of what a bureaucracy is. But those that are dealing with representational forms that humans put to use in the world, whether it's writing systems or stock photos or whatever, have a particular onus on them because it's not just, they're not, those things are always going to be fraught because, and you know, I have a bias as an anthropologist, but I think that these are, because humans are sort of like imbuing them with value and using them in the world in all sorts of complicated ways. And the needs of the institution are to protect the stuff of the institution in one way, but the stuff of the institution is inherently volatile. And so you need to come up with sort of interesting ways to kind of manage that politics. So a question back. Oh, sorry.
I'll do my sort of your right, your left thing.
Right. Hi, thank you, Keith,
Hi.
for that talk. So I'm not a typeface designer or a computer scientist or a linguist. I'm sorry for this question, okay? But yeah, because you focused on the form as an instrument to kind of gather that data, and people who are applying to have their script or letter included into Unicode. And you describe it as this interface, right, between the organization and what the data they want to compile and get from the application, and then the ones applying who are making a case. And you've said the organization cares about a technical case. It suggests, obviously, that it creates lack of access, depending on how you package your argument, and whether you can, whether the application can align with the interests and the things that are important to the organization. So has the form itself changed has there been iterations, and what does that say about Unicode's interest or lack of interest to engage with kind of more human
Sure. I mean, Anusha would probably be able to, not to put you on the spot, maybe have more thoughts on the changing of the form. I haven't looked at the form over time. It used to not be a form. It used to not be a proposal process. The proposal process was introduced at some point. I don't remember exactly when that was. But you're right. You're definitely right that there's an element, and this is why the script encoding initiative, which is sitting right here for some reason, is there to kind of help people who need to help getting into Unicode, help facilitate that transition, because there is an accessibility issue that even reading the form itself and understanding what the form wants isn't necessarily something that anybody in the world can do. I do think in general, I would say that there has been a gradual and I think real opening up of the standard to people in the world over time. A shift away from institutions and thinking about institutions and technology, still thinking about institutions and technology, but sort of allowing more space for human regular people in the world to kind of participate. It's very clear with emoji. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be the standard itself needs protection, and it needs a certain kind of there's an element, and I don't know, like protection is the word that comes to mind. And maybe that's not the right word, but I think that is actually probably what it is. And the obvious follow-up to that is protection from who or from what, right? And that is a more complicated issue that I can talk about at lunch. But thank you.
I'm moving in
This hand was back for a while.
Okay. Okay, promise next time I'll start this side.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that was a very clear and sensible explanation that feels right to me of what is the problem with Unicode. But I didn't understand exactly what you're suggesting is how to fix that. It sounds like you're saying the form is where you fix it. But to me, this sounds like an HR type problem. Because like, if someone is saying I'm an engineer, I don't deal with politics or sociology or philosophy, metaphysics or things like that. I think that's unreasonable. You can't hold such a position. You have to deal with politics. You have to deal, especially, for example, with metaphysics. Take, for example, Mandombe. What's blocking Mandombe? There's politics of the Kimbangu church. But when you study Mandombe, you first have to learn the very deep tradition of metaphysics that's in that thing before you even learn how to compose even a character. So it feels like to me this is something that needs workshops. This needs like.
So
yeah.
So to the first part of the thing, I'm not recommending anything about how to fix anything, because my job is to observe and understand, not to tell people how to fix their things. They can ask me and I can give them advice. Okay, yeah. Who do you report to for HR for this?
Yeah.
Because you're right, like on some level it's sort of like, well, that is part of your job, but the people who do this are the people who run Unicode.
Yeah.
This is this is how the system is set up. And so if anyone wants this problem has been around for decades.
Yeah.
No one likes Unicode. I like Unicode. But it's because I spent a long time talking to people who do Unicode, and they are, am I allowed to say things? I don't know if I'm allowed to say. Oh, this is being recorded. Shit.
Yeah.
But we need Unicode, but we have to be friends with people.
We'll probably be trimming the Q&A, the recording.
Yeah.
All right. It'll be like, I love Unicode. No. When you spend a long time hanging out with Unicode people and trying to figure out what it is, you come to very quickly understand that it is a really complicated problem.
Yeah.
That it is not actually just like the issue of like, yeah, you got to deal with politics. You think that, I think that. But how you do that,
Yeah.
these people have been trying to think about that for decades, and
Sure.
they're still trying to figure it out. And
Sure.
I trust them. Most of them.
Sure.
Anybody else? Okay, wonderful. You've been so good. You've just been holding and not saying anything.
We're friends.
I'm going to say many thanks to Keith. This opened all sorts of discussions. I've been bottling myself also not to say a lot of things that come to mind. It's a fascinating topic. It would be really interesting if we had people in the audience who specialize in studying institutions. Because once you start looking at how institutions work, then you realize that maybe decisions are not made where you think they're made, or they're not made at all and just emerge. So it's a very interesting thing to extend. However, I will say thank you very much.